Right, hello everybody, 𝗕𝗊𝗍𝗧𝗏 here, your friendly neighbourhood tactics guy, and Lee Carsley. He's gone and fixed England forever. Despite coming up against the footballing might of 𝗕𝗫𝗴𝗍𝗏 and Seamus Coleman, they have swept away all before them, and life after Gareth Southgate looks very rosy indeed. Now in this video, we're going to be looking at why this team looked so good and why I am rubbing my thighs in excitement. But despite the fact I don't normally like to do this, we must address the caveats. So, A, yes it was only Ireland. B, yes it was only Finland. C, yes it is just in general only the Nations League Group B. D, such was the unavailability of certain established stars. Carsley was pretty much free just to play like a juiced up version of his under-21 side, so they were always going to look a bit more cohesive. And E, such is the generalized desperation from you, me, every single person in this country to see a more progressive, less conservative version of England, that we're always going to jump over any single success they have as proof that we are really good and probably should have won the Euros. So, yeah. But, that being said, alright then, so this was the 11 that lined up against Finland, and there were changes from the 11 that lined up against Ireland, but they were mostly at the back. We had the same sort of core attacking unit. And what I dearly hope is going to be a theme every single time we talk about Lee Carsley's version of England, as opposed to Gareth Southgate's version of England, is the positional freedom these players have. And I'm going to go big right at the very start of this video to explain what I mean by that, okay? This was 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗔-𝗧𝗜𝗍𝗏's heat map against Finland. Very easy to see that he was the right-sided attacker in all this. He had most of his touches and his contributions in this area of the pitch, which is where 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗔 likes to be. But look at all the other random places dotted about this map. He gets on the edge of the box, he gets in behind, he gets fully on the left-hand side, he drives into the box from the opposite side. That is someone who is playing with a large degree of positional freedom. Yes, he has his role and he knows where he's supposed to be, but he's also enabled to problem solve mid-game. Where do I need to go to make things happen? And why that's so different to what we're used to seeing with England is this is his heat map from the European Championship final against Spain. Now here he is playing the exact same position, except that is the only position he is playing. He has to get on the ball here, he has to contribute here, and he's not really able to get round or to float into the middle or to go out to the opposite side. He has a very specific and clear job. And alright, okay, I know it's not really fair to compare playing Spain in the European Championship final versus a Nations League game against Finland, so let's make that a more applicable comparison. This is the Denmark game. Now here, unlike the final, England had more of the ball. They did dominate large parts of play. Denmark sat deep and presented them a problem with which to solve, but Saka was only allowed to do it from this position. He wasn't drifting into the centre, he wasn't swapping sides, he wasn't going to find the ball. That was still his job. And just to really ram this home, we go back to the heat map against Finland. It's night and day. Those are two completely different ways of utilising that player. And I've just used Saka as an example here. It was true of pretty much every single player on the pitch for England. Like, yes, they have this starting structure. He sets them up with how he wants them to sort of attack teams, but from there, they are free, they are enabled, they are encouraged to work it out as they go. And that meant that there was a lot of fluidity to this formation. Like, Jack Grealish was listed as the number 10, he was playing off Harry Kane, but if you give Jack Grealish the choice, what does he like to do? He actually likes to be in this left-hand channel, like this half space between the central area and wide, because he does all his best creating there. He can dribble through, he can unpick defences, and if the opposition are really deep, he likes to go all the way out to the left-hand side and sort of interchange with whoever's out there. And if we look at his heat map, then blimey, would you look at that? He was starting in this central area, but he spends loads of time in this left-hand channel and was also free to get all the way out to that side. And if Grealish is free to sort of operate out here a bit more, then that leaves this space here for Declan Rice. And what does Declan Rice like to do? He likes to start here, be involved in the build-up, help move teams up the pitch, but find the freedom to make these runs into the half space and possibly even attack the box. And you look at his heat map, and that's exactly it. He's having most of his touches in this deeper area, but he's got that freedom to move around and explore and try and find the space. And then, of course, what happens is you've got 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗏 and Anthony Gordon, two players who like to receive the ball wide, but ultimately want to drive into the box and become a goal threat. They now have somebody alongside them in these areas who they can do overloads with. They can do little interchanges of play. They can start getting in behind. They can drive at the fullback. They can cut in. They can all very easily rotate around, and that's much harder to play against. What was quite refreshing to see from England was they sort of gave themselves this front five, which is sort of fairly normal. Most teams give themselves a front five, but against such a compact, narrow defensive block as Finland had, they also went genuinely really narrow, and they pushed Finland even further back, allowing loads of room for the two full-backs to get up. You combine that with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 just being like a perfect tempo setter, sit in the hole on your own player, and England basically played in this sort of shape. And the game was just like one constant example of how England took this sort of very structured, basic starting shape, but then began improvising within it to start to unpick Finland. Like, if we just look at it here, you can see everybody's where they're supposed to be. Kane is the centre forward, Saka and Gordon are the wide players, but they've come in a little bit narrow. Grealish and Rice are both playing as these sort of advanced number 8s. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 is sitting behind them to offer a bit of protection, and the fullbacks, they're now pushing up, not too far, but just enough to still give England width and give them options out wide. But what follows shows you the fundamental difference between how England played under Southgate, which was very rigidly structured, versus how they're going to play under Carsley, which is jazz. Around like 60 seconds after they have been in this structured shape, this is the positions England find themselves in, trying to open up Finland. Jack Grealish, who was the number 10, is now the furthest left-most player. Anthony Gordon is advanced and a little bit more inside than he is. 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗏's come up to support. Declan Rice has come all the way over to provide another body. 𝗕𝗊𝙍𝙍, the left-back, is now in the half space in the channel, making sure there's an option there. Declan Rice, who was the opposite side number 8, now makes an overlapping run outside Anthony Gordon on the left wing to try and pull the defender away for him. This doesn't work, so Gordon comes back in field and finds the right back in central midfield, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, fair play to Finland, they keep their shape and England can't really find a way through here. But over the next sort of 20-some seconds, as they're trying to problem solve this situation, Harry Kane ends up with a touch of the ball over on the right-hand side. Alexander-Arnold comes back into this area, plays a crossfield pass to Grealish, who's now the leftmost player. Like, it doesn't guarantee you goals or ensure you're always going to create chances, but it's just night and day compared to how England were playing just a few months ago. And I did just mention them both there, but no players better sort of show you what this system is capable of than Trent Alexander-Arnold and 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗏. The pair of them just had like almost entirely free roles in this system, which does make sense because when your plan is to have this basic structure and then to improvise within it, the fullbacks are the least likely to be marked and also in very dangerous positions to be able to do things. Like, I'll show you Lewis's heat map first of all, because the kid understands time and space better than fucking Professor Brian Cox. Like, he kept popping up so many times in where he was supposed to pop up, but he would come in field to help with the build-up, he would join in and help 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏, but he would also just go into any gaps that appeared in the final third. Like, there was 1 or 2 times when Harry Kane was dropping out of that position that he ended up as the centre forward. But as for Trent Alexander-Arnold, that was not just his best performance in an England shirt, that might be my favourite ever performance from a right-back in an international game, which I'll admit is an incredibly niche thing. Now, I appreciate this is becoming a very heat map heavy game, but as we are talking about sort of like positional movement and where players are able to get to, kind of have to do that. So I'll show you his first of all, just to sort of demonstrate the impact he had on the game. Now, obviously, it does help they were playing Finland, and he didn't really have to do any defending, but just put that out your mind for a second. You can only play what's in front of you. He was on the touchline quite a lot, which is where you would expect to see him, and that enables him to put crosses into the box, which we know he's very good at. But just look at how frequently he was more in field, getting into these creative playmaking positions, these number 10 positions. How often he just found himself going all the way over to the left-hand side because there seemed to be an opportunity for him there. And obviously, when you're on your right foot, you can play a very different type of cross from that area. He was joining in with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 in the build-up. He was rotating with Grealish as the number 10. He was getting outside of Saka. He was giving him a way to come back in. He was doing everything. And if you give Trent Alexander-Arnold that sort of platform, there's few better players in the world at it. Like, the obvious example to use would be England's second goal, because that pass from a deep unmarked position is just absolutely out of this world. But there was a bit in the first half which appealed to me as a nerd slightly more. It was a chance that he actually gets from this sort of right-hand half space. He picks the ball up after it's sort of been circulated around and has a shot. But if you just rewind like 10 seconds before that, the chance is initially created from him picking the ball up in the left-back area near halfway and playing it over the top to 𝗍𝗏𝗧𝗏. They'd both gone out to the opposite flank, not because the manager had told them to do it, but because they thought they could make something happen there, and they were nearly right. But while it's all getting pinballed around the box and Finland are throwing themselves in front of potential shots, he doesn't just stay there, he then comes back out to this side, because again, he thinks he can make something happen there. And he's nearly right. Now, I must apologise because I am sort of shortchanging you with this video. Like, none of this structure, none of this freedom can exist without at least one player who sort of is more disciplined and still plays within that sort of principle and still does those sorts of things. But his job primarily is to make sure that all the gaps are covered, and that was 𝗕𝗫𝗍𝗏. And I should be doing a whole 20-minute segment about how he's just so good on the ball and how his body position enables him to beat presses and how you can give him the ball in any situation, how he makes a system like this completely tick. But I'm not going to do that. This was both a selection and a performance of such significance for England, I'm going to give him his own dedicated video. I would just rush what I have to say about him if I try and stick it into this video. So just take it as read. 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏 was probably the most important player on this pitch, and I will explain why sometime. The one thing I do want to touch on in this video is the role of Harry Kane, because coming out of the Euros, he did not look good. There were people saying that maybe his time as the focal point of the English attack is coming to an end, and you'd think in this sort of free-flowing dynamic system where every single player is capable of playing multiple positions and goes exploring and improvises during the build-up, he would be a bad fit, but actually he is perfect for this. Now this bit is a little graph heavy, right, so just sort of sit down, strap in, just go with me on this, right? This is Harry Kane's heat map from last night, and unlike most of the other players, it's actually not that different to what we normally see. But just to give you a basis of comparison, one of the most disappointing games I've ever seen England play, and in particular Harry Kane, that Slovenia game at the end of the Euros, right? And that's his heat map from that game as well. You can see, yes, he wants to be a box presence, but he also goes looking for the ball. But the difference is not him, it is everybody else, because here are all of Harry Kane's completed passes from that Slovenia game. You'll see, despite how much he goes looking for it, he never does anything of any significance when he finds it. You can see he's never able to play people in better positions. He's never able to get any link-up going in and around the box. For all of his movement, for all of his attempts to get on the ball, it's more or less totally pointless. Now, somewhat annoyingly, 𝗕𝗫𝗏𝗏, without whom I would simply never be able to make a single video, have not yet published the exact same graph for the Finland game. But if we look at all the locations of his successful passes, which is from who scored, which is a slightly different graph, you'll see that he is at least completing passes in and around the final third, as well as deeper. And thankfully, while I don't have the graph, I do have eyes. And so many times in that Finland game, Harry Kane would drop into the positions he likes to get on the ball, and all of a sudden, when he looks up, he does not see players rigidly stuck in their positions. He actually sees options. This is at about the hour point of the game. Harry Kane has done one of his patented deep drop-offs to try and receive the ball and evade his marker, and he gets his head up, and what is in front of him? Left-back 𝗕𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏 is here, who will very happily receive this ball to feet for a quick bit of interplay, despite there being a defender right behind him. Number 10, Jack Grealish, is all the way out on the left-hand side, completely unmarked. And because he's there, left winger Anthony Gordon is now in a central position, making a run between the defenders, and if Kane's just got it in him, he can split the lines here and find him. Which he does, and it creates a chance for Anthony Gordon. And you just never ever saw anything like that happening in the Euros. Every time Kane dropped off, all he would see is the big yawning hole that he had vacated. Like, one winger would be over there, and one winger would be over there, and Bellingham would be in the middle, marked by 4 defenders, and not a single player would have made a run beyond him. Now, I must conclude by being sane for a moment and say, does this mean England are now amazing and are going to win the lot? No, of course it doesn't. Like, they were playing Finland and they were playing Ireland. Other teams, better teams, would find ways to exploit this England side in ways that 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's side could never be exploited. Like, it's an inherently more risky way to play, but it's a lot more fun. The real tests are going to come against sides that will see 𝗕𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 making these runs, and will see 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏 taking up these positions and start licking their lips at the possibilities rather than wondering how they're going to deal with it. But I do think, if nothing else, and this ultimately proves to be a disastrous way of playing, I do think that after sort of all those years of Southgate's pragmatism and conservatism, it's probably a good thing for us as a footballing nation to have this style of play now. Because, to be blunt, if they were going to bring in yet another coach who was going to do all the pragmatic stuff first and make them hard to beat and just hope things went right at the other end of the pitch, then why are any of us doing this? Like, it's supposed to be fun. But anyway, yes, on that note, your thoughts on this new England side, I would dearly, dearly love to hear them, so please do get them in the comments below. We do try and read every single one and respond to as many of them as we can. If you're too good for that, though, you can get me on all the social medias at Adam Clery, Clery, and this is the last time I'm going to mention it. If you did see any of the running stuff I've been doing and you sponsored the charity thing we were doing, we broke £4,000 for that, and that was almost entirely you guys. So from the just massive chamber of malice I call a heart, thank you. But yes, until next time though, this was England, that's Lee Carsley. Why do we affix ball onto the end of every manager who plays a certain style? I've been Adam Clery. Goodbye.